Greetings from the Philippines. I am Jean Enriquez. I am the Executive Director of the Coalition Against Trafficking in Women Asia Pacific. I am also the National Coordinator of World March of Women in the Philippines. I would like to thank Yildiz and our sisters from Turkey for inviting us to be able to share on our work on digital violence within the context of feminist activism. So I will be shifting from PowerPoint to MP4 at some point in my presentation. So apologies if there will be some technical glitches. So let me share first my PowerPoint on digital violence and the issues within this. So even before the pandemic, before the COVID crisis, there have already been reports of trafficking online. So our organization has been receiving several complaints of Facebook advertisements for webcam modeling. So in these advertisements, the young women have been calling our attention that the term that is being used is sex work. So with this term, it seems to the young women that the harms of prostitution is being normalized or it is being hidden. And therefore, the euphemism of sex work is very confusing for young women. They are very alarmed and very threatened that the women who need tuition fee for school might be attracted or enticed towards this sexual exploitation. And for the Philippines and also our feminists, prostitution is a form of violence against women. What the women need is governmental support for their education and not further exploitation through trafficking and also prostitution. So while the women might be going into this, the consent is being bought and is also mediated by their need and their desperation to be able to continue the studies. And therefore, for the women, especially the young women, the term consent should be questioned as well. And therefore, the term sex work is inappropriate because this is actually a form of violence against women for the women, as they are calling our attention. Another issue that we have been facing since the rise of the fascist President Rodrigo Duterte in the Philippines, there has been stronger links between the Philippine state and also the Chinese government. And linked to this is the mushrooming of numerous Philippine offshore gaming operators. So in the past few months, more than 140 women have been prostituted by syndicates, and many of these syndicates are Chinese. Feminist Senator Risa Ontiveros exposed the food delivery style of providing prostituted women to workers in these Philippine offshore gaming operators. And so we have also attended a series of Senate hearings in January and February of this year to call for the closure of these Philippine offshore gaming operators, because what the women need are real jobs and not prostitution. So what the senator and also the grassroots women's groups here are asking for or demanding is for a stop to the exploitation of women's vulnerability to hunger and also to life insecurity. So other than these issues, there have been numerous online sexual harassment even before the COVID pandemic, but it also worsened during this pandemic as people have been online, especially the youth. So what we have been saying is that rape remarks are not harmless as well. These are not benign and they affect victims of sexual harassment very deeply. And it also triggers trauma among rape survivors and survivors of prostitution among the Filipino women. Unfortunately, this culture that normalizes rape comments on Facebook and other social media platforms is influenced by public officials like the Philippine president himself, who would always joke about rape and would often mouth sexist and misogynist words against women. The problem is often the targets are the actors, the movie actors, and therefore we have to emphasize that even actors are not public properties, and social media does not entitle anyone to this abuse. So there is that obligation for us feminist activists to counter patriarchal culture within a campaign to respect human rights of women, of LGBT, and other discriminated groups, to remind the public of the basic human rights principles of equality, dignity of person, and the like. And we also have been calling to stop victim blaming and to shift the accountability to the perpetrators. So during this pandemic, we have been popularizing the hotlines of, um, of duty bearers from whom victims can access justice. Other forms of violence that have been on the rise during the pandemic have been domestic violence and rape. There has been less reporting despite the higher number of cases. And why is this? Because people are limited in terms of mobility. And also they do not know who to approach, and they don't have the transportation to be able to go to the government agencies that have been mandated by the laws we pushed for to respond to all forms of violence. Also, there has been a rise in terms of trafficking and prostitution, and this has been perpetrated by those who are mobile, such as police officers, military, or the men in uniform in general. They are the ones who are purchasing the women in exchange for food. So they have been approaching the women in the communities, knowing that the women are very desperate for food and also for money. So they are taking advantage of this situation. So what we do in the face of this is that we continue to respond to numerous cases, and we have been linking up the victim survivors to direct responders of violence against women. So in the past decades, we have pushed for the laws that are responsive on cases of violence against women, on rape, on trafficking and prostitution, as well as sexual harassment in the streets. We have also trained local governments to be able to respond to this effectively. So during the pandemic, we continued these trainings on survivor-centered response to all forms of violence against women with the local community leaders or local officials. And because the internet is very scarce and connection is really not democratized in the entire Philippines, we are using cell phone to be able to do one-on-one trainings with the women responders. So this is very hard work because we do this for 2 hours every day for 3 days for the responders to be able to finish the course. At the end of it, still, the responders express that they have greater confidence to be able to attend to the cases. The other thing that we have been doing was to develop digital modules. And we try to develop this to be able to access through mobile, even without internet. But I will go to the mobile application also for reporting on violence against women after I have shared with you this a portion of the digital modules that we have developed for the communities. So that is one of the activities that we have been doing. So we have develop together with artists these modules so that the community people and their leaders will still be guided on community-based solutions to different forms of violence against women and children. So another digital response that we did was to develop also this mobile application for reporting of VOW or violence against women. So even without load or internet, they can fill up the form and they will also be shown this map as to where are the nearest agencies that can respond to them. So before this application is released, we have trained also the local authorities on what is rights-based, gender-responsive, and survivor-centered response. So we only finished that this week, and now we are ready to present this mobile application to a pilot area in the Philippines. So we have trained also the Women and Children Protection Unit of hospitals, and through this mobile application also they will be receiving advisories on how to respond to violence against women and what to remember in terms of principles such as avoiding victim blaming, about expressing solidarity with victim survivors of violence. We are also enhancing this mobile application so that it can be voice sensitive, so that when women shout, when they are being abused, then this mobile application can immediately send message to the responders that we have trained. Other than this, we continue to partner with our feminist activists on the ground, and they have been distributing these posters on strategic areas in the communities, especially in Muslim Mindanao, where information is still scarce. And also on alcohol, hygiene alcohol, we have put stickers which also contain the hotlines for violence against women responders. And we have also been mobilizing relief for the women in prostitution and other survivors of violence. And through the relief that we have channeled to them, they were able to save some funds to be able to build cooperative type livelihood programs. And they have started to sew masks and also to start food delivery, especially since hunger is a real problem in the community. So we connected the women with the farm producers in the face of problems also of farmers that there are no buyers of their produce. So what we did is to connect the farmers to the consumers, particularly our groups of survivors of prostitution. So through this, we are somehow able to alleviate the condition of both farmers and also the women. We continue to hold online programs, and we even hold rallies online. And this has been mobilizing thousands of people online. But we have been conscious also to reach to the grassroots that do not have access to the internet. And therefore, we make sure that we are able to support them through internet prepaid load. So this is one of the examples of the programs weekly of the World March of Women in the Philippines. So we called it the Women in the Front Lines, how to respond to all forms of violence against women. And finally, 2 weeks ago, we also filed a case at the Supreme Court against the anti-terrorism law because this was a recently passed law by the government which seeks to surveillance activists not only for 30 days but for 60 days. And it also legalizes warrantless arrest. And so we observed physical distancing, and we still filed a case at the Supreme Court. So these are the forms of resistances that we can share with you in the faces of the rise also of digital violence. We resist to live, we march to transform. Solidarity from the Philippines.